Greetings and good morning to everyone. I guess I should not say good morning, should I? I should say buenos dias. What's happening? It's Robert Phoenix, and I am here with Peachy. Peachy's guarding the flank. You want to say hi to? Want to say hi to everybody today? You want to say hi to everybody? Come on over. Come on over. She's guarding the flank. What's your plan? Are you going to be part of the show? She must be like looking at some kind of ghost or spirit. You know, cats lock onto something that you can't see. She's kind of having one of those moments right now. That's it. You guard that flank. You keep those bad spirits away. Anyway, how is everyone? It is Tuesday, the 30th of April. And we are clearly in Taurus territory. In fact, we did our first version of Astro Dads yesterday with my buddy Ferris Gallion, and that'll be premiering on Saturday morning. And normally, what we'll do is we'll premiere that show on. It's a pre-record show. Oh, look who's here! There she is. She was guarding the flank. Yes, she made sure that we were safe. Yeah, look at that. Look at that. If you could bottle cuteness, I could make billions off of this. I can make billions off of this. That's right. Yes, I could. Look how cute that is. Anyway, Astro Dads is going to air Saturday, and we had a really good episode. And I'm looking forward to doing that once a month with Ferris. And we're basically looking at the sign for that month and, issues around sort of parenting through that sign. Anything that comes up with Taurus, whether it's sort of the Taurus child or how you use Taurus attributes to tap in and help you parent your child, and through the perspective of two men who are dads, right? So that'll pop this Saturday, and really looking forward to that. So we are in Taurus, and why don't we just get right to it? Let's get right to it. Before I do, though, I got to talk about hitting the like button, thumbs up if you like the content. Also, subscribe. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If you have subscribed, you may want to resubscribe because there is probably a pretty good chance that you have been unsubscribed at some point, and hit the bell because the bell will notify you when the show is about to go off. So I think I've taken care of all that. Oh, if you'd like to buy me a cup of coffee today, there's a link for that as well. And guess what? There is a link also for 15 Minutes of Flame, which will be rolling into right after this show at 9:11 a.m. Central Standard Time. And that's it. I think that's all we need to take care of. Okay, well, let's get into it. There we go. So we still have those squares going on with Pluto, and Pluto's at 2 Aquarius. Now, this is what we were talking about earlier as Venus made its approach into Taurus. And I really like Venus in Taurus. It's obviously in what we call dignity, right? So it's in its own sign. Venus rules Taurus and Libra. I've often felt that the true ruler of Taurus is this world, the Earth. But in order to attach the Earth to Taurus, we'd have to do a heliocentric version of astrology, which we're not going to do. But it always felt like Taurus is earthy, whereas Venus is very Libran in a lot of ways, and there's clearly a difference between the two. One is more bodily, and the other is more mental. Well, we're in the bodily version of the sign, so our relationships, our connections need to be grounded. It's not about, if you're in a relationship, it's not about saying what you're going to do, or broadcasting what you're going to do. It's actually demonstrating what you're going to do or are doing currently. And that's a theme for the entire transit of Venus through Taurus, because relationships are about, in a lot of ways, material manifestation. And it's good. I mean, I think it's good. It's one of those transits that reminds us that we have bodies, and bodies need to connect in 3D, right? And so so there's a fiduciary relationship with Venus and Taurus, which has a lot to do with things like borrowing and lending and agreeing in contracts, and money changes hands with Venus and Taurus. That's one part of it. The other part of it too is purely tactile and sensory, and that Venus and Taurus reminds us that we do have bodies, and sharing bodies in real space and time can be a wonderful and pleasurable thing, right? The one thing that Taurus reminds us of is the natural world, and just how natural humans have the potential to be, even though we have become incredibly synthetic through our connection with all these devices. Taurus reminds us of the fact that, we are really these biological life forms. And Mercury, now that it's direct, is on its way as well. Given that, and all said, Venus is definitely in square with Pluto. So, one of the things that we're dealing with here today is something on the economic horizon. And, Taurus is all about security. So, when we have a Venus Pluto square, there is a threat to our security. And usually with Pluto, it's more psychological than it is physical. But the economic indicators have been terrible, and it, people are just, I was at, I think I talked about this on Sunday night, but was at a restaurant on, what was it, Friday? If I no Saturday, I think it was Saturday. I was at a restaurant on Saturday, and they wanted like $30 for a just a basic kind of, beef tenderloin salad, slices of beef with lettuce and onions and, tomatoes, and, you know, wasn't anything like, exceptional. I was like, wow, that's a lot of bread. Well, it's not a lot of bread, but it's a lot of bread. And it's indicative of what's going on with prices, inflation. I think people are really, really feeling this thing. And this Venus Pluto square, anytime you get into squares with Pluto, there is pressure. So, one of the things that you have to really be conscious of is how finances are affecting your relationship and can affect your relationship. And this, again, this is a theme over the next 5 to 6 days. So, you want to be very aware of that kind of pressure that's being exerted upon you and your partner. And financial woes and money woes are generally at the root, and I say that consciously, at the root of all relationship problems. If you're shaky, right? If you're shaky in terms of the relationship in general, it's those um, icy financial patches that really bring the relationship into a greater state of peril, because people are feeling the pressure. If you're a homemaker, you're feeling the pressure to make that dollar go further, and looking at choices of, well, I can get this and it's higher, better quality, but it's going to be more money, or I can get this and it's going to be lesser quality, but I'll be able to spread it around more. It's kind of like, do you add hamburger helper to your hamburger, right? To make it go a little bit further. That's kind of, that's one of the things that it's in the air. So if you're in a relationship and you're having some financial issues, you know, just you're gonna walk through it, right? You're gonna walk through it. When we get into these Venus Pluto squares, especially with fixed signs, we're facing our fears, and what would happen if the money stops flowing. Oh, well, that's a much bigger question now, isn't it? What would happen if we had a major banking crisis or a black swan event? And even if we're not having it, the thought of it can permeate people's lives. And there is this, I wouldn't call it desperation, but every day there's this incremental reminder that things are not the way they used to be. I'll give you an example. Target has announced that they're going to put all their products behind glass or plexiglass because they need to stem theft. That's a Venus Pluto square. That's a reminder of how things just aren't the way they used to be. So there's some scarcity also involved with Venus Pluto square. It's like, will I get enough? Will I get enough? Will I get enough? And people are, this is where things get tight. This is where people start to, you know, put locks in their pocketbook, right? A lot of people are delaying big purchases now, and because they're just sitting on their money. The housing market is reflective of that as well. And when you get into Taurus, you get into the housing market because it represents physical property and land. So this is a time where if you're on the other side of that equation, I'm having a bit of a deja vu, which is kind of cool. If you're on the other side of the equation, you have leverage, right? So that's the flip side of a Venus Pluto square. So if you're on the other side of the equation and you have resources and you have money, you can apply that Venus Pluto square to your advantage. You could basically, if this is your thing, you could work people, but you have to be in a position of advantage. And then you'd be the beneficiary of the psychological and physical gain, because that's what the squares are all about, right? It's like leverage. Well, it's not what it's all about, but it's a big part of it. The sun is still in square with Pluto. It's getting ready to move out. So 3 days from now, we won't be having this discussion. By the time the sun hits 13, it's moving uh, out. It's releasing from the Pluto square. So the sun is how we identify, right? Venus is how we identify through relationship and through the other. So both through the self and through Venus. This is a time of greater psychological pressure on our relationship with the material world. Now, how does that reflect back to the material world? Well, I would say keep an eye on interest rates. Now, they have to have some pressure release, I would think, at some point prior to the election, although they may just be so completely sure of themselves and audacious that they may not make any correction prior to the election. Biden may do something with student loans or student debt, but that would be a very weird optic, right, in the midst of all these protests. So they've got to find some way to get the electorate to be a bit more excited about running it back, right? So I would think that these squares would also be in the mix with Pluto, and that there would be some pressure release, uh, over the course of the next, let's call it 5 days, 3 days. We'll go 3 days, 3 days with Venus and 3 days with the Sun. So keep an eye on that, and that might be somewhat helpful if you're looking to purchase a home and trying to get a better deal in the interest rates. You might see the Fed walk some of it back. We'll see. We'll see. It just depends. It depends on how audacious they are. They may just say, "Fuck you. This is it. This is what you're gonna get. Just deal with it." Because at the end of the day, we count the votes, right? So, um, that's part of Taurus. Taurus is a very pragmatic sign, and when you get into these Pluto squares, the pragmatism can easily drift into cynicism. So just keep your eye on that, and there's a fine line between pragmatism and cynicism. Chiron has moved into Aries at 20 degrees. We talked about this on Sunday night, which is the Chiron return for the United States, and it happens every 50 years. So, of course, the last time was 1974, and prior to that, it would have been 1924. Even though Chiron wasn't even an astrological equation during either of those times. Chiron's not discovered until 1977, and Chiron is in that mix as well, right? So today it's really in square with the moon. So we also have a lot of um, kind of lunar squares going on as well, because the moon is moving into conjunction. It's at 29 degrees Capricorn. It's anaretic. So by the time we get to the end of the day, we've got the moon in Aquarius, and that's a whole other ball of wax, isn't it? With the moon Pluto square and the Venus Pluto square. So the Venus is squaring the moon as well. And that also ratchets up the psychological tension. And this is, again, this is such a fascinating period of time because we're seeing a lot of these things being played out in real time. So on college campuses, we have these Aquarian gatherings, right? Group protests are Aquarian, and the moon here doubles down in a lot of ways, right? It's like, okay, we're going to double down. We're gonna make sure that we replenish the boots on the ground, and then again over here, the Taurus really is all about the status quo. It's a very status quo sign. So I would expect that there would be more clashes, and even more laws or whatever, right? That'll come through the pipeline, and that's going to be through Venus, and that's over the next 48 hours. So this is really a very powerful time and not an easy one. It's sort of like the issues are being laid bare. The economic issues, the issues around freedom, free speech, gathering in groups, all that stuff, right? It's all on the table. And it's all in quote unquote 3D with Taurus. Now, there are some interesting things that are happening. Mars is getting ready to move into Aries. Let me zoom in a little bit here so we can get a better look at these degrees. So, yeah, Mars is at the anaretic degree of Pisces, so it's about ready to go into Aries. And we've seen Aries in action over the month of Aries, with Venus in Aries and Mercury in Aries and Chiron in Aries and the true node in Aries. There's a lot of conflict. And that's what Aries brings to the table is conflict. And Mars is about to enter from stage right and stage left. So it feels like the clash of conflict is going to ramp up. Um, yeah, these are very interesting times. I really feel like the entirety of Mars and Aries is, uh, it's not gonna be kind. We'll have a sextile with Pluto, with Mars, and again, I see that as being more social and more collective and, more of a sense of even vigilantism. I could see, kind of a rise in vigilantism, people taking the law into their own hands, whether it's on college campuses or, um, on the streets and the highways and the byways of the American story. Look, it's not just America. I was watching a video of, migrants being moved into Ireland, and the Irish are not happy about this. And I'm just wondering, the Irish can be a very political group of people, whether it was for Irish independence, there's always been kind of a touch of socialism always kind of floating in the air of the Irish um political atmosphere, right? And so the Irish have a history of taking matters into their own hands. If you go back and look at the origins of this country, the Irish became very powerful. They were union organizers. These were people who were fiery and joined together and band together as a group, right? So I would keep an eye out for Ireland with this Mars transit into Aries, and I had this vision of these relocation centers where the newly minted citizens are being dropped off. I had visions of them on fire. That this is how people are going to deal with having people brought into their country that nobody ever asked them about. They're just going to start to burn the shit down. And I think that's a theme here with Mars and Aries is the uptick in fires and burning. So keep an eye on that as well. People are that 29th degree of Mars is kind of sacrificial in some ways. It's a good thing it's not really squaring any other planet. There's a bit more flow here with Mars and the moon, but it's all very temporary. Now, luckily, when the moon moves into Aquarius, Mars will be moving into Aries, so we'll still have that sextile. And for an individual who feels inflamed, I'll use the word inflamed, and wants to do something about their individual state or condition, or even the social condition, over the next 24 hours, um, that's a very fiery proposition. So the good thing about Mars and Aries is it can be very motivating and can, get you going, right? Like if you want to tackle a project or if you want to reach a goal, Mars and Aries is great for that. And it keeps and it what it does it's very warrior like. So you're better able to deal with um, blocks and obstruction in your environment because that's what Aries does. It just keeps moving forward. It's relentless. And we're still in the springtime. So Mars and Aries during the spring is a perfect placement. There is a sense of vitality in the air. So, that you know, Mars and Pisces, it's come to the end, right? It's like the last degree of the zodiac. And there can be kind of a listlessness with that degree, but boy, overnight, it changes and it changes for the better in a lot of ways. And you go from, and sometimes with Mars transits, you're forced to act. It's like, okay, here you go. Now you got to do this. And it's like, okay, well, let me roll up my sleeves and let's get this done. So there's a lot going on. We have the changing of the guard with Venus, which just has moved into Taurus, the changing of the guard with Mars. And by the end of May, we have the change of the guard with Jupiter, which I'll be talking about on Saturday with the members of the 11th house. We'll be talking about Jupiter and Gemini, what that means, and how it's going to impact and affect us. And we did this with Jupiter and Taurus when Jupiter went into Taurus, and I thought it was very instructive. And there were a lot of astrologers like, oh, well, gee, this is great, Jupiter and Taurus, and the economy is going to get better, and it's just the nature of. And no, because I went back in time, and there was only one period of Jupiter and Taurus where the economy was really strong, and that was under Eisenhower. Usually, what happens with Jupiter and Taurus is the elites skim off the top, and it's good for them, but not as good for everybody else. So I think it's really important to understand that, because that's what I do. I go back in time and I look at previous Jupiter cycles. And then, of course, we look forward and see what Jupiter is going to be doing with the rest of the, luminaries, what it's doing with the outer planets specifically. So if you're not a member, well, you can sign up over on my website, robertphoenix.com, where you can also purchase a reading. All right. I'll say this in closing today, that the best strategies for the chart and navigating through the chart today are, to some degree, letting go. Right? Whenever you're in Pisces territory, letting go is generally the best strategy. So with that Mars at 29 degrees, if you can't do anything today, and even to some extent tomorrow, about certain conditions or situations in your life, let it go. Just go with the flow. Right? It's okay. It's okay to not act today. Right? I mean, you can act, but it's more of an action of like, well, I'm just going to go with the events that are kind of unfolding right now. And I would say kind of charge up if you can. I woke up today really tired, and it felt to me like Mars at that 29th degree of Pisces. I just wanted to sleep more. Whenever I think of Pisces, I think of sleep in the 12th house. Well, try to get some rest. Make sure you're hydrated, because once Mars kicks into Aries, it is, we're doing double time, as the military would say. Okay. Let me pop in my banner here. And here we go. Today is where I talk to you about our friends at True Hemp Science, who, aside from myself, is the sole sponsor of the show. And if you haven't checked out truehempscience.com, I urge you, because they have some of the best CBD products on the internet. And we're living in a time where we need everything at our disposal. We need to be firing on all six, as they used to say back in the day. So I know a lot of you are really savvy and aware of supplements and vitamins and physical technologies that can help you enhance the quality of your life. And this is another one of them. So if you haven't looked into CBD, I heartily urge you to check out True Hemp Science, and you'll be able to find some of the best CBD products on the internet, all organically sourced. And all you have to do is spend $100 or more and type in 15MINS, and you will get a goodie bag with your order. So you'll have a sampler. It's like getting a various artists album. It's like the old days with the Columbia record house, and you get 6 records. Well, they'll throw in a sampler, various artists, right? That's what you get. $150 or more gets you free shipping, and there's always a money back guarantee within the first 30 days. TrueHempScience.com. All right, let's get into our TrueHempScience.com star of the day. Today's star of the day is none other than Isiah Thomas. And you're probably going, who the fuck is Isiah Thomas? Well, some of you sports-minded people might know who Isiah Thomas is. Isiah Thomas was a famous basketball player. He played roughly 12 seasons, 13 seasons in the NBA. He played for the Detroit Pistons. He was the highest profile recruit at the University of Indiana under Bob Knight. Grew up in Chicago, where he was a basketball legend. His nickname is Zeke, I believe. Is that right? I'm not sure why, but that's his nickname. And Isiah is an interesting character. And when you look at his chart and you look at his life, he's got a mystic rectangle. And one of the things that I've said about people that have mystic rectangles is that they're always able to land on their feet. And if you go through Isiah Thomas's bio, post-playing career, he went from one shit show after another. Now, his big success story was he bought Speedy printers in his post-NBA career. And Speedy Printers was a franchise for printing. And Isiah basically, and again, I don't know if it was Isiah or not, but somebody in Isaiah's group made it incredibly profitable. So it sort of cemented him as this post-basketball executive and, well, for lack of a better term, monetary genius, right? Because he was able to turn that company around and make it incredibly profitable. Well, that paved the way for him to basically fail at just about everything else that followed. So he wound up coaching the Indiana Pacers, which was probably his most successful post-playing career gig. He actually had a winning record as the Pacers coach, but eventually he was relieved of his duties. And he would go on to be part ownership and general manager of the Toronto Raptors, general manager of the New York Knicks, which was an absolute disaster. While he was there, there was a woman who basically sued him and James Dolan, who's the owner of the Knicks, for $11.5 million because Isiah Thomas sexually harassed her, and she won that suit. He purchased the Continental Basketball Association for a paltry $15 million. He bought a whole fucking league. And the Continental Basketball Association was kind of an unofficial minor league of the NBA. And the NBA gave the CBA $2 million each year. And Isiah wound up running the CBA into the ground. And he had some good ideas. He was trying to, this is all like around 1998, 99. And he was kind of ahead of the curve on streaming and a lot of the, online interactivity that could be used in terms of live sporting events. But, the bandwidth just really wasn't there to do a lot of the stuff that he wanted to do. So that crashes and burns. He's the coach of Florida International University for 3 seasons. He's terrible. He crashes and burns there. I mean, every stop in his post-playing career, just about, with the exception of Speedy, is a disaster. That doesn't mean that he doesn't get paid. Isiah got paid a lot of money. He's made a shit ton of money, but it has nothing to do with his ability to be successful. So in his chart, it's really to me, it's an exposition of how a mystic rectangle works. And just as he's being kind of run out of one place, he lands and rolls and he's on another place. And he still has a bunch of businesses. He's got a champagne company where he imports champagne from a region, well, the Champagne region in France, right? But it's, again, like how successful is it? And when you see Isaiah's chart, I think a lot of it is predicated by Jupiter and how Jupiter has, and you can even see where when he had the CBA and wanted to like really dive into streaming and tap into the internet, like I can see that with Jupiter and Aquarius, like that's really what he wanted to do. And Jupiter and Aquarius is good for things like that, but the market just wasn't ready for it. And it feels like Jupiter is like one of these important planets in his chart with Saturn right behind. It's like, oh, well, here's the opportunity with Jupiter. And with Saturn, it's like, oh, yeah, well, you must be really good at it. But he's got Saturn at that 29th degree of Capricorn. And, his challenge is to finish things and to find something that he could be successful at and to write it out. And he's never really done that. But he's gotten opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. And I think, again, that's a byproduct of Jupiter. And, I've talked about Jupiter squares before in charts, and they're not terrible. Although in Isaiah's case, um, I think it's really tarnished his image in a lot of ways because it's like, well, let's go with Isaiah. Yeah, let's go with Isaiah. He'd be good at this. Yeah, he'd be good at it, but he's not. And at one point in time, he was the coach of FIU, and the Knicks had given him again another kind of consultancy position, and that didn't turn out well because you can't coach a college basketball team and have a relationship with a professional team at a consultancy level. So he was always kind of bending the rules as well, and eventually had to stop that. And there's something a little sneaky with the Neptune moon conjunction in Scorpio. And again, the square with Jupiter. Like, I don't think Isaiah is always on the up and up, right? There's a lot of promise, but there's not a lot of delivery. That doesn't mean that he wasn't a good player. He was a pretty exceptional player. And I think his resiliency is really the Sun Pluto trine and the Mercury Pluto trine in chart. He's able to kind of lock into that. And again, it's part of that angle of the mystic rectangle. And he's got that Pluto true node conjunction, which is very, very powerful, extremely powerful. And Pluto's the highest planet in his chart. So there's kind of this, I think, been a, and Isaiah's a bit of an ideologue, and I've seen interviews with him, and he's a little woke. And I think you get that with Pluto in the ninth house. You have very strong social opinions with Pluto in the ninth house. Let's see. The other thing that he had to deal with during that period was a woman sued him for, basically knocking her up and like, hey, you got a kid here. You need to support your kid. And that came out as well, right? That came out as well during that period. So we have Venus in Aries in the fourth house. And then over here, the inconjunct with the moon and Neptune. It's like, hello, yeah, Isaiah, you got a kid, right? Like that came out, the mystery of that came out during this time as well. And, he has, again, this Venus Uranus trine. And I think it sets up new partnerships and new relationships very quickly after the ones that have been sort of, I don't know, mined have come up empty or that Isaiah has not been able to deliver. He always seems to sort of right the ship. And I think it's the Venus Uranus trine and the Sun trine to Pluto, and Mercury trine Pluto, right? He always seems to somehow kind of regain this ability to convince people that he is now. If you have ever seen Isaiah, he's very soft spoken. He's got a great smile, right? And I think that goes a long ways for him in terms of being able to convince people that he is friendly and kind and easy to work with, but he's not. And it feels to me like it's a lot of it has to do with Mars in Cancer in the eighth house. And Isaiah is one of these guys that, he'd stick you in the back if he had to. Now he's older. I don't know, where his head is at these days. I really don't keep up with him all that much. But I wouldn't call him trustworthy at all. Even though he has these trines with Pluto, it's all about what he can get out of a situation. The other thing is that he accused um this was he had an ongoing feud with Michael Jordan. And when Michael Jordan was at the height of his career, he basically put together the dream team, which was the 19 was it 1992 Olympic team. And he left Isiah off the team, which is really interesting because the coach of that team was Chuck Daly, and Chuck Daly had been Isaiah's coach while Isiah was a Piston. And to this day, Isiah has never forgiven him. He's a Taurus. He's never forgiven Michael Jordan for essentially leaving him off that Olympic team because it's known as one of the great teams of all time. And that's something that Isiah would want to be a part of, right? So it got personal. And the reason why is because the Pistons and the Bulls were hated rivals at the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s. And I think some of that enmity crossed over into personal territory because the Pistons used to beat the shit out of the Bulls and Michael Jordan. And Michael believed that Isiah was behind sort of the mugging. They called it the Jordan rules. And the basic idea was anytime Michael Jordan got into the paint, you were going to let him know that you were there. And what it did is it forced Jordan to go into the weight room and get stronger. And eventually he was able to overcome the Pistons. But he believes that it was Isiah Thomas who was the architect of the Jordan rules, and he never really forgave him for that. So that was an ongoing feud. And Michael Jordan is an Aquarius, right? So he's going to have a square just naturally with Isiah Thomas, who's a Taurus, so that fixed square. And then there is a controversy around Larry Bird. And this is when Isiah was playing for the Pistons, and Larry was a Celtic. And he basically said the only reason why Larry Bird is a celebrated basketball player is because he's white. And that didn't really play well. And Isiah, it was one of the few times I've ever seen Isiah eat crow in public. I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. So he's somebody who's rubbed people the wrong way over the years. But again, he manages to land on his feet. Now, in Isaiah's, how would I say this? In his favor, he played a game against the Lakers where he was basically playing on one leg And I think it was game 7 in Los Angeles when the Lakers won, and they shouldn't have won that game. But Isiah Thomas was nothing short of inspirational during that game. And I think what you really saw was like the Mercury Pluto trine and the Sun Pluto trine. He was able to really dig down and tap into something much deeper. And I'm like, wow. And again, I like the Pistons. I was never really an Isiah Thomas fan, but I remember watching that game thinking, fuck, this guy is carrying this team on one leg. And eventually, I believe it would be the same leg where he would have an Achilles tendon rupture, which would basically end his career. That would be years after that, but I think it was the same leg. He's an interesting character, and I think more than anything, it is an exposition of a mystic rectangle and somebody who's able to go through situations where they don't always come out on top, but they land on their feet. So there's your True Hemp Science star of the day, the great Isiah Thomas. All right. Please join me over on 15 minutes where we will continue the conversation and we'll talk about some very interesting models of governance. And the title, the working title is uh, Whose Side Are You On? Whose side are you on? So we'll get into it. Link is in the description for the show. And hopefully the mods have put it in there. In any case, I wish you all a very fine day or fine evening wherever you are. God bless, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Bye for now.